What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there today. Where we're talking about them ball slingers. That's right, quarterbacks for Week 2 fantasy football. Who should we start? Who should we sit here in Week 2? However, before we get into all this week's matchups, how did we do in Week 1? Well, there's 32 quarterbacks that we gave a start or sit designation to, and out of those 32 quarterbacks, heck yeah, we got 22 of them right for an accuracy percentage of 69% in Week 1. I'll take it. Some of the biggest hits, my spirit animal, Gardner Minshew, looked great this past week. What about Cam Newton? He's back to his rushing self. Big Ben's elbow stayed attached, which is always a good thing. Some of the misses, Aaron Rodgers. I was not expecting him to come out and go all FU to the running game. I'm just going to throw it, which he did all over the Minnesota Vikings, so both him and Cousins were misses. Who was my Manscaped quarterback of the week for Week 1? It's the quarterback that delivered some of the cleanest balls of the week. It's Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. He completed 71.7% of his passes. One of the biggest knocks on Josh Allen is his accuracy. Well, he showed it off in Week 1. He looked great. He's going to be my Manscaped quarterback of the week for Week 1 in the NFL. But now, let's head into all the Week 2 matchups and find out who we should start and sit here this week. Thursday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, and do me a favor, even though I won't be able to see you, raise your hand if you were slightly impressed with Joe Burrow this past week. Did you watch any of his game? Go back and watch some of the tape. He actually looked pretty good. Cool, calm, composed in the pocket. The offense, it was pretty vanilla, right? They didn't allow him to go down the field very much, but as the season progresses, they'll open that up more and more and more for him. Remember, no preseason games. That was his first ever NFL start, and he didn't look bad. We got to see a glimpse of the rushing upside, which a lot of people weren't really expecting, and the Cleveland secondary is banged up right now. I'll start Joe Burrow here against the Cleveland Browns on Thursday Night Football. I think we're going to start to see a little bit of a glimpse of what this kid is capable of, and he's got enough weapons to make it happen. I'd start Joe Burrow. What about Baker Mayfield for the Cleveland Browns? Not a chance in hell. No, something just looks off, right? The accuracy isn't there. He's missing reads. It's just kind of confusing. He's having trouble reading, the defense. Throws are behind the receiver. Now we're starting to hear some of the drama that Odell Beckham could possibly be shocked. Maybe Jarvis Landry isn't 100% healthy. There's better options in fantasy football right now. There's a lot of good quarterbacks. I'm not willing to risk it on Thursday Night Football with Baker Mayfield, who's been nothing but inconsistent as of right now. I'm going to pass on him here in Week 2. Jags and Titans up next on Sunday, and this one hurts a little bit because I love me some Gardner Minshew, but Gardner, I'm sorry, I just don't know if I can start you this week. I may have had you ranked higher than any other person in the industry last week. I love the matchup. I like the potential that he had, and he came out, went 19 for 20, 173 yards and 3 touchdowns, and beat the Indianapolis Colts, which surprised a lot of people. But this Tennessee defense is a little bit different. It's a swarming defense that's going to create a lot of pressure in the pocket for him very, very quickly. He's not going to have time for some of these routes to develop. Some of these deeper routes, he may not have that opportunity. And the offensive line for the Jaguars is just subpar, to say the least, right? I love Gardner Minshew, but in my opinion, just a little bit too risky of a start here this week. What about Ryan Tannehill? Well, he's one of those guys that has a pretty safe floor, right? He may not be the sexiest quarterback in your lineup. He may not be the highest scoring quarterback in fantasy football. He's an ideal quarterback, too, for Superflex leagues. This week, though, he gives you that safe floor once again, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars defense just allowed 363 passing yards to Phillip Rivers and the Colts. So I really look for Tannehill to try to get back on track with A.J. Brown. We said this all offseason, right? Opposing defenses are going to try to take away A.J. Brown and force the Titans to beat them another way. We saw Corey Davis be more involved last week than maybe any other game in his career. Could that continue? If opposing defenses focus on A.J. Brown, it is. And for Ryan Tannehill, that's what gives him that safer floor. Is it Corey Davis season? Did we all forget about Corey Davis too soon? Is this the year? Possibly. Like I said, Tannehill's got a low ceiling. He's a safe floor. Just not one of those guys that's going to maybe win you your matchup, but he's not going to help you lose it either. Got him as a start this week if you're looking for a quarterback for whatever reason it may be. On to the interdivisional matchup between the Carolina Panthers and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And don't get me wrong, I like Teddy Bridgewater, but if it wasn't for that 175-yard touchdown to Robbie Anderson last week, dude would have had like 195 yards passing and no touchdowns and wouldn't have scored hardly anything. in fantasy football. I get it, not a whole lot of people are probably starting Teddy Bridgewater, and they're probably not going to start him this week, myself included. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary, highly, highly underrated. Last week against the New Orleans Saints, only allowed 12 fantasy points to the Saints wide receivers. They look great at times. A lot of people don't give them the credit they deserve. Now, what about for Tampa Bay? Tom Brady, he's going to be looking for a bounce back, right? He doesn't want to form this super team in Tampa Bay and go out and start 0-2. That is not what they're looking for, and this is a great matchup for him to get back on track going up against the Carolina Panthers, who have arguably one of the worst defenses in football. It looks like Mike Evans may be healthier. That gives Brady another weapon. Chris Godwin, is he going to be 100% by the time the weekend comes around? What's going to happen in the run game with Rojo and Fournette? Gronk, is he going to come back to life here in week 2? A lot of weapons, a lot of potential, a lot of question marks, but I'm not betting against the GOAT here this week, Tom Brady, and it is going to be a start against the Carolina Panthers. Broncos in Pittsburgh now, and it looks like Big Ben is back. I mean, he looked pretty healthy. Looks like he's having fun out there in this offense, but this Denver defense is a little bit better than a lot of people had expected. Once they lost Von Miller, they didn't look half bad last week at all. But Big Ben's got too many weapons. He's got Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Washington. He's got a slew of tight ends and running backs, whoever they want to put in at any given time. He's got plenty of weapons to put up solid fantasy football numbers, and I'm going to keep him in the start column as long as they are healthy. Where are all the Juju haters at that said he couldn't do it without Antonio Brown? Seemed to do just fine in week 1 with a healthy Ben Roethlisberger, and I expect that to continue throughout the season. Going to start Big Ben. Now for Denver, I'm not going to judge Drew Lock. He didn't have his number 1 pass-catching weapon with Courtland Sutton. He did have Noah Fant, and he did have Jerry Jeudy, who both looked good at times. However, if Jerry Jeudy continues to drop passes, I'm changing the hashtag from Dammit Devin to Dammit Jerry, because he needs to hold on to the football. Those are the type of drops that really hurt Drew Lock and his fantasy numbers and the offense overall for the Denver Broncos. He's out there killing drives with dropping passes because he's too worried about going over the middle at times. I get it. I wouldn't want to run across the middle either. That's why I don't play in the NFL. He does. He needs to catch those passes. They're hitting him right in the hands. Now, what about this week? Does he have Courtland Sutton? Does he have Phillip Lindsay? Does it even matter? They're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, arguably the best defense in all of football, and they are going to be after Drew Lock in a hurry. I love the potential of Drew Lock, but I am not in any rush to throw him into any lineups this week with so many questions in the passing game and going up against this defense. Now I'm going to pass on Drew Lock here in week 2. Los Angeles Rams, Philadelphia Eagles, and what held back Carson Wentz in week 1? If you watched the game, you realized it was the Washington front 7. They have to be one of the best, if not the best front 7 in all of football, plain and simple. They gave him no time in the pocket. They were back there in a hurry. Chase Young is a beast. Well, congratulations, Carson Wentz. Now you get Aaron Donald and the Los Angeles Rams, which may actually be a little bit of an easier matchup actually here this week. Does he have all of his weapons? Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, D-Jax, Jalen Reagor, Miles Sanders could be coming back, and if that's the case, he's got a fairly safe floor, does Carson Wentz. The ceiling, that's going to depend on the health of all of his pass-catching weapons. If they're active, the ceiling's going to go up, right? If they're not, it's going to kind of cap his ceiling just a little bit. However, the floor is pretty safe, and I'm going to go ahead and start him here in week 2. What about Jared Goff? It's really hard to trust Jared Goff, right? I mean, he threw for 275 yards last week, but no touchdowns. And without those touchdowns, he really didn't help anybody. Now he gets a defense going up against Philadelphia with Darius Slay, Nikhil Roby-Coleman, and the offense is just different in LA now, right? I mean, it just looks different, not as dynamic as it was in years past. Right now, there's no way I start Jared Goff unless the matchup is just too good. And right now, this matchup going up against Philadelphia is not too good enough for me to throw him in a lineup. Jared Goff sitting in the sit column. Niners and Jets now, and does anybody trust Adam Gase at this point? Nope, still nobody. I mean, literally, there's nobody trusts Adam Gase at this point, and now they're starting to lose weapons, which doesn't help at all. No Le'Veon Bell, he's going to IR. Denzel Mims, the rookie wide receiver, IR. Jamison Crowder, really the only target worth a crap in this offense, and now opposing defenses are going to know that. Sam Darnold, in his time in this offense under Adam Gase, has scored less than 13 fantasy points 8 out of the 14 games that he's played. That is not good. That is not a number, and that is not something that I'm willing to trust in fantasy football we're going to sit Sam Darnold. What about San Francisco? Right now I have Jimmy G as a start, but there's just so many questions in this offense also, right? What's the health of George Kittle? We know there's no Deebo Samuel. We know that there's probably not a good chance of Brandon Ayuk. They've brought in Mohamed Sanu. What kind of weapons does Jimmy G have? Well, he's got a few running backs in the backfield, more than capable of, taking on more receiving work with Raheem Mostert and now Jerick McKinnon, who looks back to, what his old self was back in Minnesota just a few years ago. And that kind of helps Jimmy G, right? It gives him a little bit more safety. Similar to some of these other quarterbacks, the high ceiling may not be there, but he's not going to do bad enough to really lose your matchup. He still has enough weapons. What we do need to pay attention to is George Kittle. He's kind of the linchpin, right? Do we really want to rely on Jordan Reed? I don't think I really want to in Fantasy Football Week 2. We need to make sure that Jimmy G has some resemblance of a weapon out there on Sunday. If he does, I'll throw him in the starting lineup. Now, I'm sure you probably have better options. He's not going to be one of my highly ranked quarterbacks here this week. However, if for some reason you're in a pinch or you just waited on quarterback to like the very end and Jimmy G is your guy, I don't think he hurts you. I don't think he really helps you a whole lot, but he's not going to lose your matchup for you here this week. The way they involve these running backs just gives him that safe floor here once again. Bills and Dolphins now, and if I had a tail, it would be wagging. That's how much I like Josh Allen here this week. Going up against the Miami Dolphins, who just let Cam Newton run all over the place, and Josh Allen's coming off of a super great game in Week 1. How good was it? Well, he completed 33 of his 46 passes, threw for 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, and had 57 yards rushing on the ground. Sign me up for that going up against this Miami defense. I'm all over it. He's got a solid offensive line and plenty of weapons around him with Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss. Yeah, I'll start Josh Allen in a heartbeat here this week. What about Fitzmagic? Ryan Fitzpatrick? No, not doing it. Devontae Parker? Not 100% healthy. Jordan Howard? Not 100% healthy. Great defense of the Buffalo Bills. No way is it worth it. Not starting Ryan Fitzpatrick at all. Vikings and Colts now, and Indianapolis was just picked apart last week by the man, the myth, the legend, Gardner Minshew. But the Colts have only allowed one 100-yard rusher in over their last 33 games. So does this mean that Kirk Cousins is going to throw the ball a little bit more? I mean, he only threw the ball 25 times in Week 1 and still finished as quarterback 9. Now, Xavier Rhodes on the other side for the Indianapolis Colts isn't what he used to be. I mean, I'm looking for another solid game once again for Kirk Cousins. Adam Thielen will be involved, and then after that, he's going to try to get everybody else involved. There's not a true number 2 target in this offense as of right now. However, in this matchup, looking for another solid game for Kirk Cousins, I'll start him. As for Rivers, kind of hard to figure out, right? I mean, I can see the yardage being there on a weekly basis. I can see 300 yards passing weekly. What I don't see is consistency with touchdowns. And that's what's really going to, hold him back from being somebody that I feel comfortable starting on a weekly basis. We know that offensive line is good. We know that there's no more Marlon Mack, and now we get Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines. I see a lot more running coming. A lot of the touchdowns dominated by the backfield, kind of similar to what we saw last year in Green Bay, is what we could see going forward in Indianapolis, and I think that really limits the ceiling of Phillip Rivers. Not a horrible matchup for him by any means. We saw Aaron Rodgers pick apart the Minnesota Vikings, so if you have no other choices, the upside is potentially there. It's just a little bit more risky. The ceiling just a little bit lower for old man Phillip Rivers, who still likes to throw interceptions. Not a must start, just one of those guys where if you have to, you cross your fingers and hope for the best. Lions and Packers now, and Aaron Rodgers came out and just said to all you guys looking for Aaron Jones in the running game, y'all can suck it because he's just throwing it to Devontae Adams. That's basically what happened in Week 1. I mean, his performance in Week 1 was better than 15 of his games in 2019. That's how great of a game he has, and now he gets the Detroit Lions, who have no secondary. Did you see what Mitch Trubisky did to the secondary? Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams could go absolutely crazy once again. He's going to be a start. What about Matthew Stafford? He really needs Kenny Golladay back. Don't get me wrong, he didn't have a horrible game, right? 297 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not horrible, but he needs that big play threat. He needs Kenny G to really give him that high ceiling. Something we need to pay attention to here this week to see if he's going to be available. The one good thing here, and the reason why I'm going to start Matthew Stafford, is because if Aaron Rodgers comes out and dominates like we're talking about, Matthew Stafford's going to have to throw the ball all 4 quarters, and I'm all for some garbage points in fantasy football. Sign me up for Matthew Stafford here in week 2. Falcons and Cowboys now, and yeah, there's no way I'm sitting either one of these guys this week. Matt Ryan just threw the ball 54 times in week 1. Dak 39 times. 2 defenses that are very, very vulnerable through the air, and this could very easily be one of the highest scoring games of the week. Now, that I said that, I'm sure the whole 2020 thing would be that if it's like a 6-3 game, right? That would just totally make sense for this year, but there's no way I'm sitting either one of these guys. The weapons are all over the field with Julio, Ridley, Hurst. You got Cooper, you got Michael Gallup, you got CeeDee Lamb, Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley. I mean, all over the place, all over the field, there should be plenty of opportunities for both of these quarterbacks to find success in the end zone. Let the big dog eat on this one, firing up both Dak and Matt Ryan. Giants and Bears now, and you know all that love that I just showed for Matt Ryan and Dak Prescott? Yeah, I don't feel that for Daniel Jones or Mitch Trubisky at all, really, this week. I mean, you have Daniel Jones going up against a difficult Chicago defense. You have Mitch Trubisky with a potentially unhappy Allen Robinson, whether they've hugged it out now. I have no idea what's going on in Chicago. Do we really want to trust it? It wasn't bad last week. I mean, Mitch Trubisky played pretty well, but I just cannot find myself trusting Mitch Trubisky in week 2 of fantasy football. Regardless of what he did in week 1, it's a little bit of a better matchup for Mitch, but there's just too many good quarterbacks in fantasy football, right? You shouldn't be at the point of your fantasy football season in week 2 where you're looking at your team going, crap, I got to start Mitchell Trubisky. There's a lot of good options and a lot of good matchups here this week. I'm not willing to risk it on either one of these guys. Daniel Jones has potential. Once Golden Tate comes back, if he's 100% healthy, it's really going to help open things up a little bit more. It was a difficult matchup for him last week, not taking anything away from him, but this Chicago defense is pretty good itself, and he could find some struggles here once again. He's going to be very big play dependent, and that's not what I want to rely on in week 2. Football team and Cardinals now, and I'm sure glad Kyler Murray is a mobile quarterback. I mean, the front 7 of the Washington Redskins has got to be one of the, if not the best front 7 in all of football. Murray is not going to have any time in the pocket whatsoever, but really, he didn't have a whole lot last week either against the San Francisco 49ers, and he still finished as quarterback 5 because he also had 91 rushing yards. If you get 91 rushing yards from your quarterback, more times than not, you're going to have a pretty solid fantasy day. It's a tough matchup, but with DeAndre Hopkins, it's really going to help things out. Expect a lot more quick slants, a lot more hot reads, really getting the ball out of his hands quick. Plus, if the pocket breaks down, Kyler Murray can make things happen with his feet. I'll start him again here in week 2. For the Redskins, Dwayne Haskins is like a game manager now, right? He's like old school Kerry Collins. Like, he's not going to help you lose, but he's not going to put up those huge numbers as of right now. However, I do expect a slight uptick maybe in production here this week going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Do we see a little bit more from Terry McLaurin? I really believe that we do. Is it enough to start Dwayne Haskins? No, he's kind of in the Mitch Trubisky category as of right now where he can play pretty good, but there's just, better options out there. Keep an eye on him, though, because this is definitely an offense that can grow and in some better matchups could start to put up some solid numbers. I don't hate Dwayne Haskins, I'm just not going to start him. Moving on to the Chiefs and the Chargers now, and has anyone ever thought about benching Patrick Mahomes? If you have, stop playing fantasy football because you're never going to bench Patrick Mahomes. I don't care who he's playing, but this is no cakewalk either, right? He's got to contend with Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram, Casey Hayward, Chris Harris Jr., but it's Patrick Mahomes, and I'm pretty sure he can score on just about anyone. As for Tyrod Taylor, he cannot score on just about everyone. I mean, he likes to throw the ball deep to Mike Williams. That potential is always going to be there, but honestly, he needs to start relying a little bit more on the underneath routes with Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. Yes, I heard the coach speak from Anthony Lynn this week. Do I buy into it 100%? No, I really, really don't. Austin Eckler is arguably one of their best pass-catching weapons, and not giving him the ball in space in the passing game would be a huge mistake for the Los Angeles Chargers. I look for them to kind of right the ship a little bit here this week. Plus, we know Mahomes and the Chiefs are going to go out there and score, forcing the Chargers to throw all 4 quarters. I'm not going to start Tyrod Taylor, though. However, looking for a slight uptick for Eckler and Keenan Allen here in week 2. Ravens and Texans, and I'm going to sit Lamar Jackson. Just kidding. I just want to see who is actually paying attention out there. I mean, this is a great matchup for him here this week. The Houston defense did not look that good last week on Thursday Night Football. How much bad luck did they have that they have to start off with the Chiefs and then the Ravens? Yeah, tough sledding for them, but it's going to be another easy one for Lamar Jackson with the rushing upside he has. Would not surprise me if he finishes as quarterback one here this week. What about Deshaun Watson? I'm worried about Deshaun Watson. I mean, if you have him, you kind of got to start him, right? But this defense for the Baltimore Ravens is elite, and the Houston offense just looked unorganized at times last week. Like, a lot of people were just out of position and lost at times, and that's what really has me worried here this week. Hopefully, the long week here leading up to this game gave them time to work out a few of the kinks, but he's going to need some big plays in this game. He's not going to be able just to nickel and dime it down the field and rack up, some huge stats. He's going to need a broken defensive coverage and some big plays. Whether it's Will Fuller or whoever else it may be, he's going to need a big play to give him a solid fantasy day. You're starting him, but I'm worried about it, and I'm limiting expectations because the matchup is that tough. Patriots and Seahawks could be a great game to watch here this coming up weekend, and Cam is back, right? I mean, I love the comeback potential once I knew he was going to New England. He's happy, he's cocky, and a happy, cocky Cam Newton is very, very dangerous for NFL defenses. Now he's back to his running ways. 75 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for Cam Newton last week gives him that really safe floor on a weekly basis. Now that we know that it's obvious that they're going to incorporate that style of quarterback play into this New England offense, it really helps out Cam Newton. However, Seattle's a little bit better, right? They're better than Miami last week anyway, and they're going to be able to score some points on the Patriots as well. What does that tell me? Cam Newton may have to throw the ball a little bit more this week, which only helps his floor for fantasy football. Sign me up for some Cam Newton. For Seattle, you just don't sit Russell Wilson, right? I mean, he's got to be one of the best options in fantasy football on a weekly basis, regardless of the matchup. The floor is super safe. We love Lockett. We love DK Metcalf. Chris Carson looks energized. They're getting him involved in the passing game, and they're not overworking him on the ground to try to keep him fresh and healthy, and it really looked like it worked. Look for Greg Olsen to be slightly involved again, and if Cam Newton continues to move the ball down the field, Seattle's going to have to keep their foot on the gas as well. I'm loving Russell Wilson, going to start him here this week also. Saints and the Raiders on Monday Night Football. I don't know, it's like the best I got. But anyway, no Michael Thomas for the New Orleans Saints, and that really hurts the ceiling of one Drew Brees, who has a lot better matchup this week going up against the Raiders than he had last week going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. But what does he do without his top weapon? Well, he's still got Emmanuel Sanders, Jared Cook. Maybe we see more Alvin Kamara in the passing game, and I love this matchup a lot better. Is he going to be one of my top 10 quarterbacks for the week? No, he's probably going to be outside of the top 10. He still has that safer floor, but without Michael Thomas, the ceiling could be severely limited and really kind of makes you think on game day, right? If you have Drew Brees and maybe you have one of these other guys with a better option, like, heck, I'll take a Cam Newton over Drew Brees here this week. It just kind of hurts with no Michael Thomas, something to pay attention to. For Derek Carr, I just can't do it. This New Orleans defense, caused Tom Brady to throw a couple interceptions, made some mistakes. Henry Ruggs is banged up. Bryan Edwards may take a couple weeks to really get solidified in this offense. Does Henry Ruggs miss time? How much Josh Jacobs do we see? Is the game close? There's a lot of questions surrounding Derek Carr. I don't think he's a bad play, but I'm not rushing out there to start him this week either. However, once all of his weapons can get healthy, be on the lookout for Derek Carr because he could have a great second half of the season. All right, those are all my starts and sits for the quarterback position here, week 2 fantasy football. You may not agree with some of them. That's okay. We're supposed to disagree. That's what makes these shows interesting. Different perspectives. That's all we're trying to supply, so it makes your decisions on game day a little bit easier. Make sure you leave those comments down below. I have multiple members on our team trying to get through the comment section to help give a little bit of advice when they can. However, if you're looking for those guaranteed answers, Patreon is the place to go. There's a link down below in the description. For $10 a month, you're guaranteed answers to all of your fantasy football questions through Patreon. So that's what you're looking for. Head over there now that this video is over. We greatly appreciate the support. We are super close to 100,000 subscribers. Only the second privately owned, YouTube channel that could get to that mark for fantasy football. So it's a blessing and it's right around the corner. We thank you for all of your support. If you enjoy this content, make sure you help us out. Hit that subscribe button now. But for everybody out there, good luck this weekend. Hopefully you can take home a dub here for fantasy football week 2. We'll be pulling for you, and make sure you check out all of our other videos here the rest of the week. Have a good one.